Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us here this morning. Today we're here to talk about the International Tropical Peatland Center. This is an initiative started by the Republic of Indonesia and with a number of different partners. And with us today to discuss this, we'll have Her Excellency Siti Nubaya, the Minister of Environment and Forestry in the Republic of Indonesia, Dr. Robert Nasi, the Director General of the Center for International Forestry Research, and Satya Tripathi, who's the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations Environment. So if I could please have all of our guests come up to the stage, that would be fantastic. And to start us off, Robert will make some remarks, followed by Minister Siti, and followed by Satya. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all for being here. I mean, we are here to discuss and to answer a question about the International Tropical Peatland Center. Let's be clear. I mean, peatlands are something like 1% of the world area and something like 10 or 15% of the carbon stock. So it's a tremendously important ecosystem for climate change. You have peatlands in the north, in the temperate boreal zone, and you have also a peatland in the tropics, and the Tropical Peatland Center is trying to develop a network, a community around the sustainable management of peatlands. And I will not speak about Indonesia because Minister Siti is here and she knows better than me. But working on peatland is a no-brainer. It's important for biodiversity, it is important for carbon retention, it is important for hydrological services, it is important for livelihoods. So this is one of the places where you can have the so-called triple win, and you don't have many places like that. On the other side, this is a very fragile ecosystem, and if you do something wrong in the peatland, you are going into big trouble immediately, and it is very difficult to change it. So it is of the utmost importance to conserve the intact peatland we have as peatland and to work very actively in terms of restoration of the current degraded peatlands. And this is what we would like to do by creating the International Tropical Peatland Center, involving countries that have large area of peatland. So Indonesia is one for sure, but there is also a large area of peatland in the Cuvette Central and the Congo Basin. There are large area of peatland in the Amazon. And these are a bit less well known than the Indonesia part, but it's not as much important. And there is a lot of south-south exchange that can happen in terms of learning of the mistake and learning of the success of each other in order to have more sustainably managed peatland.
Thank you, Robert. Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity, and let me explain a bit and share with you regarding the International Tropical Peatland Center ITPC, which is held in Indonesia. Indonesia is ready to join the growing movement to pay more attention to sustainable peatland management, such as the Global Peatland Initiative, International Peatland Society, and so on. An interim secretariat for International Tropical Peatland Center, or ITPC, was launched in Jakarta on the October 30th last month. Follow-up discussions have been conducted several times and starting very active work, and the recent one was in Batam just 2 weeks ago. We recognize the need for sound, credible, and legitimate information, analysis, and tools to design and implement conservation and sustainable management for tropical peatlands, as Indonesia was experiencing the big peat fire in 2015. The center's main objective is to ensure that policymakers, practitioners, and communities have access to sound, credible, and legitimate information, analysis, and other tools needed to design and implement conservation and sustainable management of tropical peatland. The center should seek to make effective, cost-efficient, and equitable solutions more readily available, create necessary enabling conditions for good policy, support national goals for sustainable development and climate mitigation and adaptation, and provide international visibility to the participating partners and multiple donors successfully addressing peatland conservation, restoration, and management to the benefit of people and the local and global environment. It is a home for consulting and advocacy. In the spirit of international, multi-stakeholders, and multi-donor South-South cooperation, the center is built on the principle of true cross-sector collaboration and integration, building a resilient and holistic platform for science, policy, and practice, and attracting the best minds working on research and practice in this field. The center will support current initiatives but bring a new, distinctly science-based approach to the dialogue. As a physical entity, it will crystallize a home base for global tropical peatland science, sustain policy debates, capacity building efforts, international coordination, and strategy development for tropical peatlands. The center is based at the two forest research campuses in Bogor, namely the Research, Development, and Innovation Agency, the Minister of Environment and Forestry, and the Center of International Forestry Research, CIFOR. The center needs to publish the practices of sustainable management of tropical peatland that should include industrial planting, peatland conservation, water management, monitoring water table, hydro buffer, hotspot monitoring, and combating forest fire. It might have been observed in the field that sustainable peatland management does not only involve government but all stakeholders, including local communities, global societies, and the private sector. Public-private partnerships should be promoted in order to accelerate achievement of our major agenda. Many developed countries such as Norway, Germany, Japan, Korea, US, Australia have been committed to provide financial support for taking the plan into action. Also, international organizations such as UNDP, UN Environment, FAO, GIZ, etc. I would like to invite countries and parties concerned to support CIFOR and ITPC. I thank you.
Thank you, Busiti.
Merci, merci Siti. Merci pour nous montrer la voie. Comme vous l'avez si bien dit, l'Indonésie a connu un des pires incendies en 2015, d'une grandeur d'ordre qui a engendré vraiment une situation très difficile pour un pays comme l'Indonésie. Je me souviens que le président à l'époque disait nous avons l'impression d'avoir fait face à des incendies pendant 18 ans et on ne sait pas comment agir. Mais vous avez su prendre des décisions vraiment clés comme une décision concernant les tourbières. Vous avez étendu l'accord sur les forêts qui existait déjà et vous avez pris des décisions concernant les politiques locales qui étaient très difficiles à prendre, mais vous avez su le faire et agir à temps.
Subscribe to are based on science and all policy is evidence-based. So let me take this opportunity to thank the Republic of Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and of course Indonesia on the ongoing implementation of the Brazzaville Declaration on Peatlands. Peru is also on board to join in the global efforts to advance peatlands protection, restoration, and drainage-free use through concrete commitments to South-South collaboration. All of this would not have been possible without C4 coming forward and becoming the home to the International Tropical Peatland Center, which I hope and believe would become a global center of excellence in harnessing all the outstanding knowledge base that exists within Indonesia and making it available to the rest of the world. So it is bringing the world to Indonesia and taking Indonesia to the world, both ways, and that's absolutely outstanding. As Ibu Siti has already pointed out, that the center's main objectives are to ensure that policymakers, practitioners, and communities have access to sound, credible, and legitimate information, analysis, and all other tools needed to design and implement conservation and sustainable management of tropical peatlands. In the last few weeks, we have come across two very significant reports. One was, of course, the IPCC special report that told us in very stark terms where we are. And I was in Paris a few days ago launching our flagship emissions gap report, which tells us that we are firmly on track to 3.2 degrees Celsius increase by the turn of the century. Not 2 degrees or not 1.5. And if we want to stay at 2 degrees, we'll have to do 3 times more. And to be at 1.5 degrees that the IPCC report recommends, we have to do 5 times more. And that G20 is not on track to achieving those goals, and G20 is 80% of the emissions. And so that is why initiatives such as this couldn't have come at a better time. And so I strongly compliment Ibu Siti for her leadership. And I have had the privilege of working under her leadership when I was head of UN ORCID in Indonesia, and subsequently when I was working with her ministry and several other ministries in helping set up the Tropical Landscapes Finance Facility in support of the forests and landscapes of Indonesia. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Very much to all three of our speakers. We've got some time for some questions. If anyone would like to ask a question, just raise your hand and let me know. And if not, perhaps I could start with one, Your Excellency. In your conversations with your counterparts in the other tropical peatland countries, what are some of the opportunities that Indonesian leadership can help with in taking the first steps to establish a sustainable approach to peatlands?
Thank you. We declared together and we signed a memorandum of understanding between Indonesia and the two Congos. And we acknowledge the importance of establishing this agenda to support country with sustainable management of triple peatland in a sustainable way. We are building the capacity of human resources in managing peatland and promoting multi-stakeholders cooperation on tropical peatland management, including with peatland-based industries, and developing interdisciplinary and integrated research for development focus. And we agreed to work together on establishing an interim secretariat, which is already established on the at the end of October the 30th. And to invite other countries, particularly with peatlands and international organizations and research institutions to contribute and join the work. And we give tasks to the Secretariat to prepare necessary arrangement. Actually, Minister Arlet from Republic of Congo has been visiting our provinces, which is implementing the peatland in the field, and she witnessed the community's work, also the any tools, the practice, the measurement of the depth water of the peatland and things like that. We also got visitors. We got also Parliament of Norway delegation to see and check, and they recognize that this is really a good practice, and it is worth it that we should learn each other on this aspect. That's what has been improving. Thank you.
Do you have any questions from the audience yet? If not, maybe I'll have a question for Robert. C4 has done a lot of research on peatlands for many years. Why have peatlands been so overlooked globally in terms of their impact, climate, and other sort of ecosystem services?
I don't think that peatlands were overlooked. It's more the fact that they were a bit, I couldn't say underestimated, because these are not the people, but I mean, the importance of peatland was not really known. I mean, so that's fundamentally, this was seen at a place that was not necessarily very productive. Not very much people were living in the place where you have deep peat. You cannot do agriculture. So at one stage, someone 40 years ago in Indonesia took the decision to say, okay, we are going to put this land into production, and for that we are going to do canals, and we are going to drain the peatland, like the Netherlands has been draining the land, like many European countries are draining their swamps and their marshes, because we didn't realize the importance of this ecosystem for the whole planet, for the fact that they are filtering water for the cities, that they are storing a huge amount of carbon. So, and as a result, because these systems are very fragile, I mean, a sort of, when you change them, when you change the peatland, what you are building with a dried peatland is a potential fire to happen. And I remember working in the forest in Kalimantan in 1996, was a long time ago, where you had fire from 1982 that were still burning under the ground. So if you change the peatland, you change something and you cannot get it back, and it's huge. But nobody was really thinking about that, and then the problem becomes so big, and it didn't become someone's problem until President Jokowi decided that, in a sense, it was his problem in Indonesia. Because, okay, there was, what is burning, it's not the intact peatland. What is burning is places that have been degraded, that is largely idle land, that doesn't necessarily belong to someone, necessarily used, but it burns every year and generates a huge amount of carbon. So I think people now have realized the importance of this ecosystem. There is a momentum in terms of restoration in general and restoration of peatland. People have realized how much it costs not to do anything compared and to do something, but also to do something, it's expensive. If you think about Indonesia, Minnesota, I think in the last 2 years they have reweighted 200,000 hectares of peatland, more or less. This is the cost is between $1,000 to $2,000 per hectare. Assuming it's $1,000 per hectare, and the target of rehabilitating 2 million hectares of peatland is there. So you have 2 million hectares, but 1,000, it's $2 billion. It's not insignificant. If you don't do anything, you are losing trillions of dollars in ecosystem services, in people health. I mean, there's a huge impact on health. So I think we are at this stage where there is a momentum, there is a recognition, but and we have the political will in Indonesia and the two Congos and Peru and other. But then the international community should step up and help this political will also.
Let me add some for Robert. The importance of this peatland experienced by Indonesia is we can see the example of the peat fire in 2015. It was about 2.6 million hectares were burned, and 800,000 of the 2.6 million hectares burned is peatland. And in Indonesia, we have about 4.5 million hectares of the peatland are under concession, private concession, in the industrial planting, forest for woods and pulps and papers and those things, as well as for oil palm and those things. So for this, we also recognize with our research in Indonesia, we see for as well that the peatland is causing 30 to 32 times emissions compared to vegetation in the mineral lands. So we really recognize that this is very important to deal with this peatland management, so that President Jokowi also promised in the Paris Agreement in Paris, saying that we will take radical steps, something like that, a big improvement on this peatland management. And we deal with concessions, with traditional communities, practices, and of course the law enforcement. So that is more or less the steps. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Minister. I had a question for Satya as well, if there are no other questions from the audience. From your vantage point globally at UN Environment, obviously there are a lot of countries with different kinds of peatlands. What are the opportunities and what would be the challenges that you would say in terms of the other large tropical peatland countries?
Well, I think we shouldn't, we can look at it from the lens of opportunities and challenges, but we can also look at it from the lens of where we are at this time and what needs to happen rather urgently. As I remember from 2015, when the peat fires were happening in Indonesia, on most days, the daily emissions exceeded the total emissions of United States of America on a per day basis. That tells you the gravity of the challenge and the situation. And the total emissions that came out were higher than the total annual emissions of highly industrialized G7 countries like the UK, Germany, and France, and what have you. So that's what the peatlands store. That's what we need to protect and keep it underground. And given that the world has a finite carbon budget of 2,900 gigatons, and we've actually mostly used it up. So this is that, you call it the eureka moment, that we know now, thanks to science, which we didn't know 40 years ago, what is it we are protecting. It was more anecdotal, intuitive evidence at that time, but now we know definitively what is it that we are preventing by protecting our peatlands, and both in terms of ecosystems and in terms of GHG emissions. And this is a global problem, locally situated, all right, in a few countries, but it contributes to a global solution. So countries of the world need to see the opportunity for what it is, in terms of how it contributes to meeting the Paris targets on a global scale, and support the countries such as Indonesia and the two Congos and Peru and others that will get on board in due course, to support them to achieve these goals. Talking nicely, a talk doesn't take you very far. And we need to live up to our commitments. We need to support countries that are stepping out of their comfort zones and taking serious political risks by standing with the cause for the people of the world, whereas they can easily take a parochial view of, no, I need to stand with the people of my county or my province or my country, which is a far easier decision to make. So we need to show much greater respect and recognition to leaders, that step out of their comfort zones, and that is why I admire the work of Ibu Siti and Pak Jokowi so much, because it's very easy to talk, and they're walking the talk. So I think for those in the room and those that we are reaching out at this time, I would strongly urge that we see the opportunity for its true worth and stand with Indonesia and other countries in finding the resources to bring the change that we want to see. And as for UN Environment, we have been a very strong partner with Indonesia, and will continue to do that and work in the strongest possible way. Indonesia has shown the world that when governments and the private sector, when they work together, that nothing is impossible. A small example is, thanks to Ibu Siti's help and leadership, we established the Tropical Landscape Finance Facility in Indonesia, which has already generated $350 million in investment to protect forests, to protect fragile ecosystems, and there are much more coming along. We are working on a variety of other, I'm not there physically anymore, but I keep an eye so that we make sure that the billions of dollars of investments that are possible flow to Indonesia in helping build the momentum for finding the resources that we need to protect our fragile ecosystems. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think we have a question over here.
I guess I have sort of a two-part question. I mean, they're separate topics, really, but so first of all, I guess maybe just an example or two of the type of initiative you would employ to try to, retain livelihoods while preserving this ecosystem, maybe specifically in Indonesia. And then the other question is, in terms of the overall center and the aims there, has there been any interest from any countries in the north in joining the organization?
You want to answer for Indonesia?
Sorry?
You want to answer for Indonesia?
Yeah, but you answer first about the Peatland, the center, yeah.
Okay, I will first answer the Peatland, and Ibu Siti will talk about Indonesia. In terms of the country in the north, and here I'm speaking under, I wouldn't say Chatham House rules, but a sort of, we have a very, let me put it this way. Each time we met, Ibu Siti, Pak Agus, or myself, country in the north, and we tell them what we would like to do in the tropical Peatland Center, people are positive because they can see that it is a, as I said, a no-brainer. I mean, sort of, by investing an amount of funding, by supporting this effort, you get a big return in terms of your investment in development aid money. So we have talked with Norway, we have talked with Germany, we have talked with USA, with United Kingdom, with Sweden, with Korea, with Japan, and I probably forget, and I've never get a sort of, oh, no, we are not interested. So now everybody is interested. What we need now to materialize is really someone starting, and everybody will follow. So we need a sort of a catalytic effect. But there is a strong interest. And our challenge now is to make sure that we keep this momentum and that we transform the trial.
Yeah, thank you. The main ideas of the recovery, the peatland in Indonesia, is to make them wet. That's the main principle. So the initiative to control or to start with this peatland management is to control the hydrology. how we do it, we ask and oblige the concessions to control their hydrological technique. And it has to be put into the 10 years plan and also the annual plan. And the government also put some control points for each concessions. Let's say it's depend on the area's concessions, let's say about 8 or 9 or 10 points to control the depth of the water. Because we have to keep the water depth of maximum the water table of 40 centimeters. Of course, it's not easy because there has been covering about more than 300 concessions area, and we were fighting because they didn't like that the government started to rearrange, and then we tried to convince them. And part of them also, they bring us to the court, and we try very hard to make them understand with the regulations. So we also give some extension works to the local communities and give some examples for this hydrological technique by canal blocking or and those technical matters. And also we introduce the research results, scientific base for paludiculture, so agriculture on this peatland. So they can bring together the work, the vegetation with the local species, as well as the productive annual plants, something like that. When the communities make this canal block, for example, they can also do the fish pond. So a lot of economics aspect also come up, and it works. Again, this is not easy work. It's Indonesia has a huge areas, and bit by bit within these 3 years, 2016, 2017, and 2018, it works, and resulting a good things that there is no more big forest fire in Indonesia. This something like that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I noticed 2 other questions. Do you still? Yeah.
Good morning. You started to talk about some pressure in peatlands in Indonesia. So maybe you can tell us that story. Are Indonesia peatland under certain pressure, like economic pressure? And how did that work, for example, with the ban you announced of new palm oil plantations? Also, I would like to know, that's another question, no? I would like to know if you are talking about science and research results in order to push public policy. Do you have some sort of climate change denier, like for example in United States with Trump, that it's making harder to protect peatlands? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. In Indonesia, we have about more than 15 million hectares of peatland. And when there was, I was in charge as a minister by end of 2014. And when we got problem with big fire on the 2015, I tried to collect the whole permits and license. And it was collected, the data was indicating that more than 4.5 million hectares of the concession and permits is in the peatland. And of course, and also the due to this peat fire on 2015, we put a strong law enforcement and regulations. A lot of challenge and resistance for this, and we try to explain what is the necessity of putting them into regulation to control the hydrology and also oblige them to do the revegetation and making the recovery of the peatland, making the peatland wet and those things. So you are right that regulation is very important, and our president has a strong steps for these corrective measures and regulations. And the good situation we finally got that all concessions, they are agree with that, and they do the practices, and already more than about 170 or something that the concession corporates, they make the new plan and make an adjustment with this regulation. As well as now we are still asking and supervising about more than 140 the estates for also make a adjustment for these hydrological matters in the peatland. So this is more or less the experience. And for public policy in Indonesia, we recognize that public policy can sources from the legal basis, can also from political, let's say, basis, as well as from traditional and practitioner required, and of course from the scientific basis. So there are some, let's say, contents of the regulation is based on this scientific knowledge. And regarding the climate change agenda in Indonesia, we have a very strong legal basis for environment. It is in our constitution, in the Article 28, saying that the citizen has rights to get a good and healthy environment, something like that. So this is very strong legal. It is constitution saying that citizen has rights for good environment. In the Article 33, it is also mentioned that resources of Indonesia has to be managed sustainably, something like that. So I believe Indonesia will give a very strong support for this climate change agenda and international conventions on this on the purpose of a good environment. Thank you.
One more question here.
Good morning, I'm Nistia from Indonesia. I have a question for Bu Siti. Bu Siti, what do you think about native species approach and rebated area management in order to restore our peatland? And the second question is, what will be the key factors to face the challenge in our Indonesian peatland? Thank you.
Yeah, regarding the practice, the traditional practice in Indonesia for this peatland is already long history. That's why in the law, in our law regarding the environmental management, in the article it was saying that the peatland can be managed by the traditional and the land clearing methods. By fire is allowed by the limitation of 2 hectares. So the traditional practices is recognized and and admired by law and by practice in Indonesia. But the problem is when they do the land preparation by slash and burn, which is more than 2 hectares, with no, let's say, no technical arrangement, the boundaries and the apa tuh namanya? Batas ya. The buffers and those things in the land clearing or land preparation methods. So the local government give the intermediary, let's say, guidance by saying that you can do the land preparation by slash and burn, but please not do it in the dry, very dry season, something like that. And also, technically, we support the local farmers with the technical of the boundaries and this buffer zone, something like that. So the key factors for this traditional or communities in working in the peatland is that we keep the traditional practice, and the main principle is keep the peatland wet. Yeah, there are some situations that, let's say, when the canal blocking started and farmers complain to us that, well, look, this is started for flooding, something like that. So we come again and check what is the situation. So we give a lot of support and daily working together with them. And the good things is also a lot of support from CSO and academician, and they also initiate. They have a lot of initiation from the locals. So that is more or less the situation. Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of our session on peatlands. I'll just, for those of you who are interested in following up on the discussion, there are 2 discussion forums later in the afternoon at 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So please join us for those ones. And in the meantime, thank you very much to our panelists, and enjoy the rest of the day.